Welcome to World Crisis Radio, reporting tonight from Beirut, Lebanon. I am here in the Middle East on a special fact-finding tour of Syria and Lebanon. I've been in Syria most of this week. Now it's Friday night. It's getting to be, 9:30 in the evening here in Beirut, looking out over the Mediterranean from the hills and the bluffs above the eastern Mediterranean. Right? This is the Levant. This is Beirut, Lebanon, and we're in the Maronite part of the city, the northern part of the city. It's a city of 3 million in a country of 6 million, and indeed, it's a relatively luxurious place. To come here today, I went through the Bekaa Valley. And I have to remind people, if you've ever seen anything about the Bekaa Valley in movies or lore or stuff like this, the image is completely fantastic. It's basically there are resorts, there are restaurants and casinos in the Bekaa Valley. Nothing so horrendous as what you see. And I've been in South Beirut. We'll maybe talk about some of the content of that next week, but. You go to South Beirut, right? You look at some of these movies like Syriana, right? You go to South Beirut, it's like the far side of the moon, and of course it's not. Right? This is basically a very Europeanized country. Lebanon certainly the most Europeanized or Americanized in the entire area. But let me tell you now, what we've done is going from Damascus to the city of Homs, which was supposed to be the epicenter of the rebellion, going to the coastal town of Banyas, north of Tartus, on the Mediterranean, where the Russians have their famous naval station, the one toehold that Russia still has in the Mediterranean, then going to the Baghdad military hospital yesterday, and then driving here to Lebanon today. And let me just go through the findings in brief summary. This is not like Libya. That's the first thing, because if you've been to Libya, you want to do the comparison. This is not a civil war. There is no civil war. There is no front. There was no doubt in Libya. There was a civil war. There were fronts. It was unlamentable, but there it was. Benghazi, Darna, Tobruk, that area fell to the rebels quite early on, and the NATO bombing kept Gaddafi's forces out of there. And when you went to Libya, you'd see about 50 checkpoints between the Tunisian border and downtown Tripoli. In the case of Syria, you fly into the country, the international airport's working fine, the people are basically going about their normal everyday business, and there were no military checkpoints. We drove from Damascus to Homs, and there were no checkpoints. There was sort of a half-hearted checkpoint outside of Homs, and then when you wanted to get into this neighborhood of the Zakra, which we'll talk about in a minute, the so-called center of the rebellion, there was another checkpoint. So it's not a civil war. There is no mass insurrection against the Assad government. There is no mass political movement against the Assad government. There is no religious war. This is basically an optical illusion or the simulacrum of a rebellion. In other words, it's just a fake substitute. Nothing like Libya. There's no mass killing of civilians by the army. The casualties, you hear these counts, like 3,000 people killed in Syria. Now, what the credibility of that is, I don't know. But the point I would make is that these figures don't include the fact that I think the most recent figure from the Syrian army command is that it's about 1,100 soldiers who have been killed in the fighting over the past 7 months since it started. It started here in Syria in the middle of March, right? So remember what the schedule was supposed to be. January was Ben Ali, February was Mubarak. That's how they got it. Then Gaddafi was supposed to go in March. Then it was supposed to be Assad probably in April, but it hasn't happened. And the difference here in Syria is that, first of all, there was no significant faction of generals that was willing to betray the country and go over to the NATO side. So that's a big difference. And the other thing is the color revolution dimension, right? The camouflage dimension of this is extremely threadbare. There's very, very little of it going on here. There's really no political movement of much of anything against the Assads. So what I find, death squads, right? The kind of thing that Negroponte used to be expert in Central America, Latin America. The difference is that whereas the death squads were focused on specific political targets, like usually communist or things like this is not the way it is here. Here it's just killing. The idea is if you can kill somebody, then as soon as the killing occurs, Al Jazeera will be there and blame the Syrian army for doing it. And this is unbelievable. There is a hatred here against Al Jazeera which is beyond belief. And they deserve it. And, I don't know what that will mean in the future, but that can't be good for some of the people who work there. So what you got is death squads doing random violence, blind terrorism, simply killing for the sake of killing. Now, the other thing is, what's the structure of the destabilization? Well, clearly, at the top, it's the U.S., the British, the French, the Israelis, and NATO intelligence. The money, as we've been told by a number of people, the money comes from the Saudis, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, right? The Thani family of Qatar. The managers of this is really interesting. The managers turn out to be the renegade former foreign minister of Syria, Saddam, a wheelhorse of the earlier Assad regime. And let me just say that the general rule of thumb is that Hafez Assad was pretty oppressive, but his son Bashar is much more of a reformer. He really is a reformer. He has done a number of things to sort of loosen it up. So the idea that it's a dictatorship is simply not true. And I can tell you, I've had the experience of being in a bus with people, no government representative. We could drive wherever we wanted, pretty much. And that's not going to happen if a country's under attack. If it's a real dictatorship. The logistics. You look at the centers of this. What can we call it? The centers of death squad activity. That's the border with Turkey, the border with Jordan, the border with Iraq, with Kurdistan, and the border with Lebanon. So it's fomented from the outside. It goes from the outside, from the periphery, from the frontier in. The fighters, I think, represent maybe 500 trained killers, people from the sort of greater Middle East taxi milieu, right, where you recruit these people, right, Belhaj, Bin Laden, Kumu, Barani, this kind of thing. Certainly it can never be more than 1,000 people. And it's interesting because you think about the potential for a much wider war here. You're going to blow the world up for the fate of 1,000 or less, far less, I think, killers. And they come on the scene in black uniforms with black hoods. The average people here tell you that most of the killers are foreigners, that they're Iraqis, Afghanis, Libyans, Jordanians, patsies, once again, from these places. I think it's pretty clear. The CIA has put out a call saying we want all jihadis, all fundamentalist fighters to come to Syria now. Right? People who've been active in Libya, they can have another engagement in Syria. The people you see in the streets tell you that the killers are the fundamentalists, the anathematizers, right, the people who don't allow anybody to disagree with them, the bearded ones, the Salafists. And I mean Salafists in the Western sense, right, that they're killers, right? If you're here in Lebanon, there are Salafist writers who are actually pretty moderate. But let's just use it in the normal Western idea of a Salaf